don't know where it's recording to, though. Well, we'll figure that out later, I guess. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start talking a little bit about public speaking, what it is, how it works, some of the reasons that people are afraid of it, and yet they shouldn't really be afraid. You know, part of the problem is when people think of public speaking, this is what they think of. They think of this kind of stuff.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land.
There's more, but that's enough. You get the point, right? That's what people think of when they think of public speaking. And again, like I said the other day, if you approach this class with that in mind, you're going to be like, well, this is the dumb class for me because I'm not going to do that. But again, like I said the other day, you're not a psychic. You don't know that you're not going to do that. And second of all, it's just about communicating, daily communication. 95% of what I'm going to teach you in this class can be applied to your daily, your everyday conversation in some form or another. So if you keep that in mind, the stuff we're going to talk about becomes far less tedious and far more applicable to your everyday lives. Fun fact about Martin Luther King Jr. Did you know that his doctoral thesis was significantly plagiarized and has a note in the front of his doctoral thesis at Boston College that says a significant portion of this was plagiarized? That's crazy, but there was still enough of it that they gave him his doctorate anyway. Yeah, he was a phenomenal man, but as a human being, he had some less than he was very abusive to people. So he had great, fantastic ideas, but yet kind of darkened by some of that personal stuff. Just shows you that nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. Public speaking is really all about learning how to communicate better, more effectively, which is nothing more than the process of sending, receiving, and processing of symbolic cues. And what does the word process imply? What do processes all have? What's that? Remember that part about participation? I'm not asking like advanced algebra here. What does every single process have? Steps, parts, bits, right? Communication is no different. There's parts and steps to communication, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And part of the reason why we suck at it is because we don't really think about it from that perspective. We don't think about it as having parts and steps. So we often aren't very good at it. But that's what communication is. It's a process, which means that it requires focus and mental energy. Symbolic cues. What do you think symbolic cues are? Don't overthink it. What are symbols that we use every single day? Nonverbal is definitely part of that, but even more basic than that. Although I don't know if it necessarily be more basic. Well, eye contact is 100%. Eye contact is very important in this class, as you'll see throughout. Words. Words are symbols. The fact that we can communicate at all is sort of amazing, considering words are symbols. But we don't always agree on what those symbols mean. Very, very different interpretations. And that's a big part of it, is just realizing that your language needs to be specific. You need to pick the right words. That gets talked about in a later chapter. Now, chapter 1's, no matter what communication class I've ever taught, whether it's public speaking, human communication, technical communication, any of it, it all has one thing in common. And that thing is that it's a bunch of crap thrown together. It's a bunch of random things that are stuck in a chapter that don't fit anywhere else. This is no different. So unlike a lot of the other stuff that kind of progresses naturally, there's a lot of like separate issues in this chapter. And the first of that thing we're going to talk about is benefits. Why do you want to be a better communicator? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you want to be a better communicator. Personal benefits. You in this class are going to acquire skills that you can 100% apply to outside of this class, outside of school, in your daily lives, being more organized, right? If you are an unorganized person, this class is going to be tricky for you because you have to be organized to be a good speaker. You have to. And so that's a huge thing. Being able to critically think, right? Being able to listen to a message and go, no, I don't agree with that. Or but what about this? You know, no one, something ain't right about that. I got to think about it. I got to ask questions. And that's super important this semester, because this semester, you guys have the benefit of having me in a class during the historic election. And I will tell you that this election on November 3rd or whatever it is a historic election. More so than any election in my 47 years of life for a lot of different reasons. And if you are old enough to vote, please, by all that is holy to you, go vote. I don't care who you vote for. Well, that's not true, but I would rather you vote than not vote, right? Being able to research effectively. Oh my God, all you got to do to see that people suck at researching is look at Facebook for 5 minutes and see the crap that people put out there as true. Today already, I have destroyed 4 or 5 people's arguments with literally 30 seconds worth of research. I'm just easily, not even hard, right? It's about knowing what questions to ask, knowing where to look, knowing, is this research overly biased? Who's the author? What are the sources? First thing I do when I see somebody post a source, a link, I examine the source. I have 2 bias checkers that I use. And then I examine the author. What's the author's background? So I can look at that piece of information and go, no, it's so biased. Like even though the information in it is not necessarily incorrect, it's heavily biased, which can skew the results, right? So you kind of learn how to do that. Because if you do crappy research for your speeches in this class, I will call you on it. And you will lose a lot of points on it. I don't want crappy research. I want good research. How to analyze things, right? Looking at connections between ideas. Well, this person said this, but literally everything they've ever done, ever, is against what they just said. Example, current administration. What do they say about vets? Come on, guys. And I mean guys in the non-gendered, generic sense of the word. What does the current administration say about vets? I start throwing things. There's nothing to throw. I'll throw this paperclip at y'all. I usually I have chalk and markers and stuff. What do they say? Come on, man. Literally. Right? We got to support the vets. Vets are good, right? Of course the vets are good. Why wouldn't they be good? Of course they're good. They serve the country. But what do they do that does the opposite of that? What have they done to the VA in the last 4 years? They've gutted it. They consistently underfund or defund or eliminate programs that are designed to help vets get jobs, get houses, to not kill themselves in record numbers. One of the highest portions of people who kill themselves are vets, especially combat vets. It ain't easy to be in the military, especially during times of war. And you come back expecting to have a decent life. You can't get a job because your brain is still over there. You have PTSD, but all your funding has been cut. It takes you 6, 8, 10 months to get into the VA. So what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the rhetoric, we support veterans, or are you going to believe the reality that you can see with your eyes, right? You got to be able to do that. You got to be able to look past the rhetoric, and hopefully in this class you learn a little bit about that. How to ignore what people say and look at their actions. I don't care what a politician says. Left, right, center, I don't care. I look at their actions. I look at their voting record. I look at what they actually do on a daily basis. So if you say you support something, does your record back that up? Do you say you're against something? Does your record back that up? That's an important skill that you will learn at least a little bit in this class. How to deliver things effectively, right? I read a lot of papers. Like I read in my history classes, I'll read a paper and I'll go, oh my God, what does this say? Doesn't make any sense. People don't know how to make things come out of their mouths in a way that makes sense. And by that, I mean type either. You learn how to effectively deliver a message in the most efficient and concise, but still interesting way possible. Wording matters, right? Picking the right words is a huge thing. How often do you guys think about your word choice on a daily basis? Anybody? Do you do a little bit? Do you? That's good. Like, because most people don't. Most people don't think for 2 seconds about the words that come out of their mouth. They're just going to say what they say. Myself included half the time. My brain moves faster than my mouth. But when I have to say something important, I try to, kind of come up with a plan. So I'm picking the right words, the best words, the most effective words. Why do you think we have so much miscommunication in our daily lives? You tell your buddy, hey, I want you to call me in the afternoon. Is the afternoon a good word or a bad word? It's a bad word. Somebody said it. Is it Hannah? Is it Che? What? Too broad. What the hell does afternoon mean, right? So you're in your mind, afternoon means 1 o'clock. In their mind, it's 4:30, right? And so you have to learn. In a speech, you only have 4 to 6 minutes. So you have to pick the best words for that spot. So you learn a little bit about that, right? It helps you become more knowledgeable on a particular subject and remember it more often. They say one of the best ways to test your knowledge or understanding of a subject is to be able to teach it. And that's essentially what you're doing in these speeches, is teaching us on one of these subjects, right? You're giving little mini lectures on a subject, sort of. I mean, it's a little bit different, but basically that's what it is. And if you understand it better, it's going to come out better, which is going to make your audience respond more positively, which is going to make you feel better, build your confidence, which is then going to make you more comfortable, which is going to make you deliver your speech even better, which is going to make the audience respond more positively, which is going to further build your confidence. This class is a cycle, right? If you come up here and you're confident and you're going to be more comfortable, you're going to know what you're talking about, you're going to deliver a great speech, your audience is going to feel that and they're going to respond appropriately, which is going to give you more energy. And it's just this thing that builds on itself. And I'm telling you right now, it 100% works. If you come in here and you're constantly doubting yourself and you're constantly second guessing yourself and you're constantly unprepared, you're never going to do well, because you're never giving yourself a chance to succeed. Don't do that to yourself. I'm telling you right now, you're all capable of this. And when you do it just a little bit, and you give a killer introduction, right? You got a killer introduction. Your audience is like, damn, man, that's a hell of an introduction. Your confidence is going to skyrocket. And your speech is going to get better. And that applies to your outside lives too. When you build confidence in one area, it gives you confidence in more than just that single area. There are also professional benefits. And this means student or your job. Collectively speaking, companies lose billions a year because of ineffective communication, especially listening. Your boss comes to you and says, John, I want you to do this project for me. And you're like, okay, boss, I will do that. And you're like, okay, when's it due? And they're like, oh, it's due in 3 weeks. You're like, okay, cool. But that's it. So then the boss goes away. You spend 3 weeks working on it. He comes back 3 weeks and you turn it in and you're all excited. And you're like, yeah, boss, here's the thing. And they look at it and they go, that's not what I wanted. Whose fault is that? What's that? Is it John's fault or the boss's? John's. In part, right? It's technically both people's fault. But yeah, a lot of that would rest on John's fault because he didn't ask the questions. He assumed that the boss was giving him the information that he needed. Never assume that you're getting the information that you need. I believe that one of the biggest failings that students in general have is they don't ask enough questions. Period. I don't care how old they are. I don't care what class it is. The only exception to that rule is non-traditional older students tend to ask more questions because they understand the value. Younger people tend to be afraid to ask questions because they're afraid of looking like they don't know what they're talking about, but you're in school, so that's sort of the point. If you in this class, if you're ever unsure of something, please ask questions. I will spend as much time as I need to go over it until you understand it, especially when we start getting into the building blocks of the actual speeches, like outlines and stuff. Do not walk out of here with doubt. Ask your questions, right? When you can go into a job interview and listen to what the person is asking you, and you can answer that question clearly, concisely, and effectively, who's going to get a job? You or the person who spent 10 minutes talking about nothing? You, right? You're going to get the raises because you're turning in work. Your work is better. Your grades will be better in class if you are a better listener. If you know, hey, I got to ask these questions. It wasn't clear what was meant by that thing. So your grades will be better. Your jobs will be better. You'll get more promotions and raises if you are a better communicator. Please don't rat me out for taking a drink. I don't know if you guys saw that email that went out today. Like, you're allowed to move your mask, but don't take it off. Well, does that count as moving or take it off? I don't know. You got to get a straw, a little trap door, like, you know, those old school long johns that had the little trap doors for going to the bathroom. Just do a little trap door. Man, these Gannon masks, did you guys get these too? They are thick. They're so thick. I feel like I'm in the swamps of Louisiana, like breathing humidity. And I have asthma, man. So there's professional benefits and there's public benefits. This is an important one. I believe that we as a society are in the position that we are in large part because we suck. We do not engage in the political process. We do not get involved with our communities. In large part because we just don't know how. We don't know what to say, right? I know you guys are young, and I will tell you that when I see people like in the mass numbers standing up and saying, this is not acceptable, that's exciting, right? That gives me hope that we don't suck as much as I want to think we suck. Because people are saying, no, that's not acceptable. Good, you're right, it's not acceptable. Let's do something. Let's ask the right questions. Let's make the right statements. You know, when we go to that town hall meeting or we go to that school board meeting, we know what questions to ask. We're not afraid to speak up. You know, if you look at the classic republics, which is what the U.S. is. The U.S. is not a democracy, it's a republic. If you look at the true republics of the world that lasted and were good, ancient Greece is the big one, the one thing that they did was all of their citizens actually were involved. If there was an issue, they all were like, this is unacceptable. And there have been times in the U.S. when we have done that, but there's been a lot of times when we don't. I mean, Jesus, 53%. That's how much percentage of our eligible voting population voted in 2016. Or maybe it was 56%. 53, 56, something along that lines. The one before that was, again, 52, 53. The one before that was actually higher because that was 2008, and people were excited to see the first black man running for president, and so the turnout was a little bit higher than normal. But we run right around 52, 53%. Please don't text in my class. There's a couple of you that I've seen doing it. I will ask your ass to leave, and it will be an unexcused absence. Put your phone away. right? We aren't engaged. We don't want to look like we don't know what we're talking about. So we just say, I'm just going to, well, that sucks. But what are you going to do about it? Nothing. Why not? Because you don't know what to say. You don't know how to say it. Hopefully in this class you learn, not just this class, but this kind of what some of the skills that you're going to learn can put you on the path to being able to do that. Being able to question and say, you know what? I know what questions to ask. I know how to ask them. I know when to ask them. And when you can do that, and when your community can stand up as a whole and say, that is unacceptable, when the community as a whole can say, hey, wait a second, that's when things change. If you look at the United States, historically speaking, when times have, when there's been major change, it's because people stood up and said, that's not acceptable, right? Historically, go back as far as you want. In the United States, we see it in 1865, we see it in 1919, we see it in 1964, we saw it 4 or 5 years ago with the legalizing of gay marriage and all that, because people stood up and said, hey, that's not acceptable, right? And it's only when we as a society say enough is enough that those changes happen. No matter how noble a cause is, if society doesn't step up and say, hey, that's wrong, it ain't never going to change, right? People were talking about being against slavery from pretty much the minute it started in the United States, and it never changed until the society as a whole said, hey, wait a second, that's probably not a good idea. So being a good communicator can help you in a lot of ways. So, this class isn't the end all and be all. But it's a good start, right? It's a good start to get you on that path. By the way, for those of you who are following at home, I don't have you up on my screen at all. So if you have a question or anything, send it via email and I'll see it on my watch. There's got to be a better way. Still working out some kinks in this. As I said, a lot of people are afraid of speaking in public. And some of it is just an innate shyness. Some people are just shy. That is a thing. When I was in, junior high school, until I started doing theater, I was very shy. I hardly talked to anybody. I know it's weird now. You look at me now and you're like, that's not true. It is true. I barely talked to anybody because I was shy. And so I always, there's more to it. I know people who are exceptionally outspoken and not shy. They're afraid to speak in public. And I never understood why. I actually wrote my thesis about this, communication apprehension, and how to overcome it. And what I boil it down to is people are afraid of looking silly, right? I call it the silliness barrier. They're afraid of looking like they don't know what they're talking about. But that's ridiculous because you already have like 95% of what it takes to be a good speaker. You do it every day, right? You organize your thoughts logically. You don't speak, to think of a word, a sentence. Now just mix up the letters, right? So not only are the words in different order, but the letters are in different order. We don't speak that way. We don't start in the middle of a story and go backwards and forwards. We already organize our thoughts at least a little bit logically because nobody would be able to understand us. But we could probably be better at it. We already tailor our message to fit who we're speaking to. How many of you have like little brothers and sisters? Like how old, Shay?
I have one sister who just turned 2 and a brother who just turned 1.
How about you, Brianna?
2, 6 months, 3.
So little kids. So if they come up to you and say, what do they call you, Brianna? Sissy? Bree. They call you Bree. So Bree, how does this thing work? Are you going to answer the same way that you would describe that to me?
No.
Why not?
I would use smaller words for them.
Smaller words that they would understand. Right? We already do that. We already tailor it to fit who we're speaking to. I don't drop a bunch of F-bombs in class as much as I would like to. It legitimately is my favorite word in the English language. And outside of this room, I use it a lot. Like a lot. Probably way more than I should. But I know I can't do that, so I tailor it. If I'm going to explain a complicated geological or historical process to you, and you're not a historian or a geologist, I'm probably not going to use the same language. Hell, even in a public speaking class, I could use different language that's much more jargony, much more technical than I use. But I'm not going to do that because you're not going to understand it. We already tell a story for maximum impact, generally speaking, right? We don't start with a punchline. Maybe you do and you're just terrible at telling jokes, but the average person doesn't start with a punchline. You build, right? Think about C-3PO when he's like, I'm a terrible storyteller. And he goes on to tell this crazy story in Return of the Jedi that everybody's like, ooh, ah. We all do that to a certain extent. We adapt the feedback. So if somebody looks at you and they look confused, or they do this, or they lean towards you, you react to that because you want them to hear you. These are things you do and you don't even realize you're doing them. That's 80% of what you're going to do up here. Actually, probably way more than 80%. And that's the stuff I can't really teach you too much. Now, the organizing I can teach. But a lot of the other stuff, it's hard to teach because it's something that you do or you don't do. The differences, though, are minor. And they're the things that I can teach you and I will teach you. Public speaking in this sense is more structured. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end much more clear than there is in everyday conversation. In everyday conversation, you might start in the middle of something because you had already talked about it previously. I do it all the time. People are like, what the hell are you talking about? Because they forgot that we talked about it 2 days ago, but I didn't. My 7-year-old does that all the time. Today, driving him on my way here, I got to drop him off in Harbor Creek at their grandmother's. He starts talking about being in a car accident 2 years ago on the way to school. I'm like, what the hell, man? Where did that come from? Right? But for the most part, we don't have structure in our everyday conversations. In a speech, you do have structure because you only have 4 to 6 minutes to get your message out there. So it has to have structure. It has to have a clear beginning. It has to have a clear middle. It has to have a clear end. It has to have clear structure throughout. And I'm going to teach you that. It requires more formal language. When you communicate outside of this situation, you use slang, you use jargon, you know, contractions, and all that sort of stuff. But when you're standing up here, you don't want to do that. You want to sound prepared. You want to sound professional. You want to speak in the language, figuratively speaking, that everybody gets. I've had students give speeches, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Because they're using a bunch of slang and jargon. I have no idea. And I'm sitting there half their speech just going, what? You never want your audience to sit there being confused at what you're saying. You want it to be polished. When you're standing up here delivering one of your prepared speeches, you want that speech to be polished and prepared. You don't want it to sound like you slapped it together. It requires a slightly different method of delivery. You know, when we talk in everyday conversation, 90% of our everyday conversation is impromptu. We're just making it up as we go along. We don't think about what we have to say. We don't think about, what we're trying to get to too much. We might have an end goal and a start goal, but other than that, it's just kind of, you're winging it. But when you're standing up here, you don't want to do that. Because what's going to come out of your mouth if you're standing up here trying to wing it? It works so much better when you can see my facial expressions. I'm going to do pictures. I'm going to do pictures to go along with it. I can put it on Facebook or on PowerPoint here. And you know I know that because I've seen it thousands of times. People aren't prepared. People come up here and they just sound like ums and ers and ahs and and likes. They're clearly not ready. We do what is known as extemporaneous speaking in this class. Extemporaneous speaking means it's very well prepared. You've done all your work outside. You know, you're not doing any work up here. All the work's been done. You come in here, you have a good set of notes, and you're using your notes to deliver your speech. In this case, those notes are what is known as a speaking outline, which we'll talk about in a future class. Right? So these things are really the only differences, and they're minor, and I can teach them to you. Now, next random topic. If you remember, I was talking about communication is a process. It has parts. And the communication model is a graph of those parts. And when the communication model was first developed in the 20s, holy crap, 100 years ago, it was like two things. It was like one way. You had a sender, you had a receiver, you had a message, and that was basically it. And that's the way it was taught for a long time. But people were like, well, that's not really what communication looks like. And so they added some things. They added feedback, which made it a circle. They added noise, which is something you have to overcome. But then they were like, you know, again, they taught that for many years. And then in the 90s, they said, but that's not even right. Because in reality, communication is not one way. You're not sending a message and waiting to receive a message. You are sending and receiving messages simultaneously. And so right now I'm sending you a message, you're sending me a message, and I have to adapt to that, right, through feedback. And so it's called the transactional communication model or the modern communication model. And that's what this is. It's six. I always, for years, I taught 7 because you have sender and receiver, but technically they're the same thing. So it's 6 parts. You've got the speaker, the listener, the channel, message, feedback, noise, and context. Now, it looks something kind of like this. Now, this here, where it says situation, this should say context. Here, where it says interference, it should say noise. But this is what it kind of looks like. You have your speaker who sends a message to the listener who's sending feedback. Both of them have to overcome noise, and it's all happening within a context of things. Now, if you drop this class tomorrow, if you learn nothing but this, your communication will improve. Just from this. Understanding the process, understanding the different parts and why they're important, in and of itself will make you a better speaker. Simply because that's how bad we are at it. So even a minor change is different. It will help you a lot. Right? So, and because it's a cycle, both as a sender and a receiver of messages, you have a responsibility for each of those parts. So as a sender of messages, what is your primary function? Amy. To send a message. So what do you have to think about in the process of sending that message?
Make it as clear as possible.
Has to be clear. Has to be interesting.
Like your wording and structure.
Wording, very important. Is it concise? Is it like, you have to think about that, right? So you want to make sure that you are putting together the best possible message. Now, it takes longer for me to describe these things than it does for your brain to do them. But yeah, so you, as a sender of messages, have to make sure that you are sending a clear, concise, interesting message. That's your job. Now, as a receiver of messages, what is your job? To listen effectively. We'll talk about listening in a future chapter. And there's a big part of listening Listening is also a process that has parts, and one of those parts is feedback, responding, letting the original speaker know that you got the message. It doesn't say that you understood the message, it just tells them that you got the message. So it's either, yes, I got that message, or no, I have no idea what that message is. And when we talk about listening, we'll talk about that process more. But your job as a listener is to respond, to give feedback. Now, if you are a good sender of messages, and you're talking to somebody, and this, you guys have done it already like 4 times today, because I'm a good sender of messages, if I don't get feedback, what am I going to do? You guys don't have to raise your hand. You can just pipe up. I can't hear a word you're saying, man. So what am I going to do? I'm going to keep sending the message, right? I'm going to keep sending that message until somebody tells me that they got the damn message. Because my job is to make sure that message gets out there. And if I get no response, I have to assume that they didn't get the message at all, right? And how many of you have been sitting there playing Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, sitting on your couch watching some streaming show, and somebody in your household is going to the kitchen and you're like, hey, could you get me something to drink? And they don't respond to you. So what do? Do you just get up and get it yourself? No. What do, Jay? You ask it again, probably slightly louder. And of course, then you get no response again. And then what do? You probably ask again. And then they go, I asked you the first damn time. My wife does that to me. She's got a master's in communication, same as I do. She's one of the worst communicators on the planet. Because it's a learned behavior. She learned it from her parents, how to be terrible communicators. Which drives me nuts because I'm a good communicator. And so she's like, I heard you the first time. Why didn't you let me know? You spent more energy avoiding responding than just responding. So as a sender, as a listener, as a receiver, your primary goal is to let them know that you got the message. You either understood it or you didn't understand it. Again, we'll talk more about that in the listening chapter. So that's those 2 parts, right? If the sender is not sending the message effectively, as a listener, you have to let them know that they're not sending it effectively. If they're sending it effectively, you let them know that they are sending it effectively, right? It's a 2-way street. Then you have the message. The message is what's being sent. It's pretty self-explanatory. The message is being sent via a channel. I feel like is it a different one on the PowerPoint on, which one is it? Is it like the 2 just big giant faces?
Like boxes and arrows.
Oh, okay. I change stuff so much, man. It's the same thing. It's the same process. It's just a slightly different drawing or picture. The channel is how the message gets to the receiver. Now, in this class, I am using 2 main channels to send my message. What are they? You can talk louder, man. Not quite. You're on on the right track. I'm going to try to get. How do I do this here? Because I want you guys. Oops, I don't want to do that. I want you guys to participate too. Those of you who are at home, joining us at home. Okay, fine, whatever, man. Sort of, but not quite. My mouth and the PowerPoints. Those are my 2 primary channels that I'm conveying my message. Now, why is that important?
There's 2 ways to intake the information.
It's 2 different sources, 100%. Anybody taken an anatomy class in the past or now? Are you taking it now or did you take it?
Yeah, no.
Imagine if I said to you, Amy, I want you to learn the circulatory system, but you can't look at any pictures. What? Oh yeah, people,
But they have to see it in order to.
everybody is different. Like some people are visual, most people are visual learners. Having the moral of the story is you have to have the right channel for that given message. I was laid off of a job via a pager at 2:30 in the morning on my way to Albuquerque, New Mexico to work for 6 weeks. My layoff date was the day I was done. Now, I knew layoffs were coming because we knew that was a thing, right? It was 9/11 collapsed the whole tech industry for years, and I was doing telecom installation at the time. And so even though I was like hoping that I would make it through that because it was the last round. We had 5 rounds of layoffs. I made it to the last round, and I was hoping, right? I was hoping. Driving just outside of Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Las Vegas, Nevada, completely different place, Las Vegas, New Mexico, and my pager goes off. I have to drive at night. So I looked at it, and it had the office number. I called the office number. It was an automated message giving me my layoff date. How do you think I felt about that? Do you think I was stoked? Hell no, I wasn't stoked. So I get to Albuquerque. Had to be to work at 7 in the morning. So I get there about 6 o'clock. I'm in my truck taking a little nap. Time to go to work. First thing the guy says to us, the guy who was running the job, he was from Minnesota. I'd worked with him 3 or 4 other times. Awesome dude. He's like, all right, guys. Well, this job's way behind. So for the first week or 2, we're going to be pulling 18-hour days. And I looked straight in his eyes, and I said, you can suck it. I said, I am not working 18 hours. I'll work 10 hours. I'll work 12 hours. I am not working 18-hour days. And he was like, well, and I said, what are you going to do? I got a layoff date. So I was surly, right? That's how I responded because the channel was not particularly effective. My old roommate found out that his grandmother died in a letter. A letter. Ridiculous. How many of you have ever been dumped or dumped somebody via text message? Che, were you the dumpy dumper? How about you, Meadow? How'd you dump somebody?
I dumped him over FaceTime and somebody dumped me over the phone.
How'd that make you feel?
Both of them made me feel upset.
Of course, right? Breaking up, even when you know it's coming, even though when you can't stand each other, breaking up sucks. It's a hard thing to do, right? Because we have emotions. There's people involved. Like people are emotional creatures. And so doing it via text message or FaceTime or any of that stuff, probably not the best way to do it. You're basically saying, you know what? You don't matter to me as a human being. I'm not going to give you any courtesy. F off, right? That's kind of what that's kind of. Now, if your life is in danger or you're afraid, that's a whole different story. There's always exceptions. But for the most part, that's not the right channel for that particular message. So you as a sender have to pick the right channel for your message. If you're not picking the right channel, the message isn't being delivered as effectively as it needs to be. So you have to think about your channel. And as a listener, if they pick the wrong channel, you need to let them know that they picked the wrong channel so they can pick a better channel. Right? For example, the persuasive speeches, you have to have a PowerPoint or a visual unless you get clearance from me to not have one. And the only reason I have that rule instated is because because I didn't have a requirement, people just wouldn't do it, even though it would make their speech 1,000 times more persuasive because they were lazy, right? And I'm like, your speeches are suffering because you're too lazy to put together a 10-minute PowerPoint. Come on, man. So I force people to do it so that they actually make their speeches better. They pick the right channel for that particular message. The response is known as feedback. Feedback is often in the form of what is known as back channel cues. Back channel cues are those kind of nonverbal and verbal signifiers that you got the message, like, oh, okay. Well, what else, right? shaking your head, nodding. Those are back channel cues. Those let the they let the speaker know that you got the message. Now, both the sender and the receiver, both the actual message itself and the feedback, have to overcome noise. And noise is anything that interferes with the message. And don't get hung up on the word noise, thinking sound, because it doesn't have to be. There are basically 4 types of noise that get in the way of the message. There's internal noise, which is psychological stuff that's going on inside the mind of both the sender and the receiver. Maybe you're thinking about that party you want to go to. Maybe you're thinking about being dumped via text message. Maybe you're thinking about, I got to do laundry or any number of things. You've got external noise, which are things like anything out in the world around you. It could be somebody tall sitting in front of you. It could be people in the hallway. It could be lawnmowers. It could be static. It could be some dude in front of you with a giant defense sign. Right, at the Super Bowl. I always laugh when I see that, when I'm watching some sporting event and some goon is up there with a giant sign, and you can see the person's, the people behind him doing this. There's a sign that's stupidly big. I always said that if I ever, went to something like the Super Bowl or World Series, and some goon in front of me's got a big old sign, that sign would either mysteriously burn down or get pee on it, one of the two. I'm not saying that I would do either, pee on it or burn it down, but mysteriously that would happen. I'm not going to pay $400 for a ticket to be blocked by some dude with a sign. It could be a freaking post in the middle of the classroom. My history class. I'm in the Center for Business something. It's across the street. In my history class. And there's literally a column in the middle of the damn room with a seat directly behind it. And so I'm like, what the hell? So there's like 5 people I can't see. If I can't see them, they can't see me. Seriously? What the hell? And it's a full room, so I can't even have them move somewhere. That's noise. So I have to overcome that. And that's the moral of the story. Or the other ones are like semantic noise. Is anybody's native language something other than English? First language? No? Does anybody speak another language fluently? No? That's unusual. I usually have at least a couple people. If I'm speaking French and you don't speak French, that's called semantic noise. If I'm talking, computer terminology or military terminology with somebody and you don't understand those words, that is also semantic noise, right? It's language-based. It could be physiological noise. Physiological noise is noise that is involving the body, like you're deaf or blind or mute, or you have something like aphasia or some other issue that affects your ability to comprehend. Those are noise. And the moral of that story is you have to know that it exists and you have to work to overcome it. What do you think? And some of it is more easily controlled than others. Semantic noise is fairly easy to control in most circumstances. Physiological noise, same thing. It's fairly easy to control. External noise is also fairly easy to control in most situations. But internal noise, psychological, it's always going on. So you as a speaker have to do things to overcome that noise that you know exists. What are some things that you've seen me already do in a day and a half that are designed to overcome internal noise? I'm smiling.
Calling on people.
I force interaction, right? I force you to interact. What else? Because you never know when I'm going to interact with you. I don't just sit there, right? I'm not just a lump. I make eye contact. I use humor. I tell stories. Those are all things. I do random things about every 10 minutes. Those are all things that I do to overcome that internal noise and try to break down as much as I can. I can't ever eliminate it completely, but I can do stuff to overcome it. right? If it's too loud because there's a fan or something, I can talk louder, turn the fan off. But you have to overcome it. As a receiver, if there's noise in the way, you have to say, hey, there's noise in the way. We need to overcome it. You can't ignore it. And then there is all of this stuff is happening not in a vacuum, but in a situation. There's a series of contexts that are affecting that communication. Everything from historical context, which is every time you communicate prior to this impacts the future. So if the last time you met somebody, last time you were talking to somebody, you were MFing each other, your communication is going to be very different than if you were, I love you, man, no, I love you. Very different things. Psychological context. If you're in a bad mood, you're going to communicate differently than if you're in a good mood. Trust me, as somebody with kids, I can tell you, if I'm in a bad mood, I communicate differently to my kids than I do when I'm in a good mood. Social. You're going to communicate differently with your boss than you are to your brother or sister or friends. There's all these contexts. The physical context, which would be like the room, the setting, the time of day is all part of physical context. If you're close together versus far apart. If you're, if you got a stupid column in between you. If you're in a big room, some of you can tell already. When you're giving your speeches, you're gonna have to work hard to be heard. This is a long room, and but it's relatively narrow. So if you're hard to hear, you're up here basically talking to nobody. So for you, that's something that you're gonna have to overcome, that particular context, right? So now, what happens if you leave out a part or do a part poorly? Let's take that idea for a second. Imagine the process we're talking about is mountain climbing instead of communication. Let's say you forget to put in one piece of equipment, but you make the next one better. Is that going to save your life? Maybe, maybe not. Same thing with communication. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, I saw you raise your hand. Not John, the one behind you. Brian, right? Yeah, it breaks down. It's bad. Now, this doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Let's say I'm going to use the analogy of baking a loaf of bread. Let's say what you leave out some ingredient. Is it going to still look like bread? Yeah, probably, unless you leave out the flour and then something's wrong with you. Yeah, it'll just look like bleh. It'll look like paste or glue, right? But if you leave out one of the ingredients, it's probably still going to look like bread, smell like bread, but it's probably not going to taste like bread, right? Same thing with communication. Depending on which step you leave out or which part you don't do very well, it might kind of resemble communication, but it's not effective, right? So literally, if you walk out of here with nothing at the end of the semester but this, you will be a better communicator. Just knowing that this is a thing. The next random thing is about critical thinking. Critical thinking is a skill set that we are losing as a populace because lower level education has become so focused on passing stupid tests. So at the lower levels of education, people aren't actually learning things anymore. They're learning the stuff that's on the tests. They're not even learning how to get to those things. They're just being kind of forced to memorize the crap. That's not learning. And so I see it all the time, that people can't critically think. They can't look at something that somebody says and go, that's just not true. And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to see the relationship between what somebody's saying and what's historically true, what's going on. For example, in 2008, Obama was talking about, when he was running for president, I'm not going to raise taxes. And I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard in my life, because he's the nominal head of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party since the early 1900s has been the party that raises taxes. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing or a good thing. They raise taxes to pay for social programs, right? It is what it is. So when he says, I'm not going to raise taxes, my brain is like, no, it's probably not going to happen. It's just not, it's very unlikely that that is going to happen. And then 3 days after his inauguration on the 20th of January, 2009, he instituted 3 new taxes on, it was like tanning booths, cigarettes, and some other stupid thing like that. I don't even remember. I had 2 friends that were in their front yards literally throwing things. That son of a bitch lied to me. Oh my God, I feel betrayed. I'm like, but you don't smoke or use tanning beds or this other thing. They're like, that's not the point. I'm like, did you believe him? You're an idiot if you believed him, right? Not because he's an evil or anything, but because the Democratic Party is going to raise taxes. That's what they do. Again, not saying in a negative perspective, they raise taxes to pay for programs. So to think that they're not going to do that is just stupid and foolish on your part, because you couldn't process the reality versus what somebody was saying. So for me, when I heard that, my brain literally went to the last 100 years of reality and said, that's unlikely. And so for me, it was like, this is my shocked face. Like, I was like, okay, cool. I literally had I was like, whatever, man. So you have to be able to do that. You have to look at the relationship between ideas, what's being said, what they said in the past, what they did in the past. Like I said earlier, being able to look at reality, action versus words. Action versus words. You're gonna see a lot of, in the next couple of months, you're gonna see a lot of this. You're gonna see a lot of rhetoric flying around. Don't listen to the rhetoric. Look at the realities. Look at the actions. Look at the behaviors. What has candidate A or candidate B actually done? Don't listen to their words. Being able to look at evidence and go, no, man, that evidence is crap. I see it, again, all the time on Facebook, daily on Facebook. Somebody will post something to support their whatever it is, and it is literally from one of the worst, most unreliable news sources known to man. And they think it's the end-all, be-all. I've had people literally do that to stuff that I've had conversations about millions of different things. And I will post link after link after link to unbiased, clear evidence as I can possibly do it. And somebody will respond with a single extremely biased thing, expecting that to counter all of my actual good stuff. And they honestly don't see how that doesn't work. They don't see how the innate bias in the publication and the person doesn't actually counter the 50 reliable, as I don't want to say unbiased because there's always some bias, stuff that I will post. Because literally, if something is too far to the right or left, I won't use it. I will find something that's more centric. Because here's the thing. If your idea is right, if your idea is correct, you will be able to find something from the center to support it, regardless of what it is. If you believe an idea to be true with every fiber of your being, and you can't find something from the middle that backs it up, it's probably not true. Being able to differentiate between what is a fact and what is an opinion. That's another part of, we have trouble with that. And part of the reason is because of social media, right? Stuff gets presented as fact on there, And we're either too lazy or too rushed or too, ignorant to actually do our own research. So we just believe it as fact. And then we spread that. That's what dirty politicians count on. They count on ignorance. They count on lazy people to spread stuff that's not true. And I'm telling you, man, don't do that. Don't trust anybody. I see an article, I immediately start researching that article before I even really read the article. We'll talk more about some of this stuff in different future chapters. But that's the thing, being able to differentiate what is a fact versus what is opinion. You're going to learn some of that in this class, kind of whether you like it or not. Get off my lawn. Now, I know I said this, but I'm going to say this again. I'm going to remind you. This schedule is probably not super realistic. Because remember, this is the man. So the next chapter we're going to be doing is audience analysis. So yeah, the order, I was basically given a schedule that I have to use, and it's stupid, doesn't make any sense. You get halfway through the semester before you learn how to outline. That's one of the most important skills you'll learn in this classroom is outlining, and you don't learn it until the 30th of September. The second part of today is talking about ethics. What's tricky about ethics?
There's a lot of opinions on it.
Very little is universally accepted as unethical or ethical. How many of you, by a show of hands, would say that stealing is wrong? Of course. Of course. Of course, every one of you is going to say stealing is wrong. How many of you, again by a show of hands, illegally stream and download music, videos, movies, whatever? For those of you who are actually being honest, I appreciate that. For those of you who aren't raising your hand, I call them shenanigans. Because I guarantee you, there's not a person in this room that hasn't done that at some point, including myself. With me, though, it's books, because audio books. Although I don't do it anymore, because now there's all these different programs I didn't have 5-6 years ago that are audiobook things that I can go to various libraries. But yeah, I would get books, although 99% of the time there were books that I owned, the hard copy, and I would just get the audio version of them, and then I would delete them because I didn't want to steal too much. I wanted to steal a little, right? Now, how is that different? It's not. It's theft. You're stealing from somebody. But I would bet that if I sat down and talked with every single one of you who admitted to doing that, you would justify it and come up with a reason why it isn't wrong. Why? Who knows? It's still wrong, right? That's the problem with ethics. That's the problem with ethics, is it's not universal. Whose idea of right and wrong? Now, that being said, there are things in society that we as a society have kind of agreed on are not good things. Stealing, murder, etc. We agree that those things are bad. You can make arguments as to what exactly theft is and stuff like that, but ultimately, we have agreed that certain things are more negative than others. So it's not completely irrelevant. But people say this all the time. Well, this is only a public speaking class. It doesn't matter. That's not true. Your words have impact far past this door, far past the end of this semester. Your words will continue to be with people, especially if it's exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. Those words will stick with people. And so you have an ethical responsibility to present a positive message, right? And so not only does your talk, your message has to be ethical as can be, but the way you get there needs to be ethical. it's real easy to get people to do what you want to do by lying. For example, I saw a meme go around that was a series of statements. What the Democrats say, what the conservatives believe that means. Like, we want religious freedom. Democrats say we want religious freedom. Republicans here, we want Sharia law, right? It was a whole series of those. The whole purpose of that meme, 100%. First of all, it's probably created by a Russian troll bot farm. The whole what do you think the purpose of that is? What is the intent of that meme? What's that? To divide us further by demonizing one political party. Completely demonizing them. Here's the thing. Again, as a centrist, I don't particularly care for the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. If I'm going to demonize a political party, it's going to be based on fact, not made up crap. I don't need to make up stuff to demonize a political party. There's enough stuff that they actually do that I can criticize. I don't need to make stuff up. And so, and here's the thing. There's enough uneducated, ignorant people, and ignorant here just means they just don't know, who are either too lazy or too incapable for a variety of reasons to realize that that is literally crap. Like, it's legit BS. And they're doing it to demonize at a time when that's a problem, right? You can argue all you want that there was no Russian interference in the 2016 election, but the actual truth is that on Facebook there was massive Russian disinformation campaigns in the 2016 election that definitely 100% swayed the election. Russia admitted to doing that, but it wasn't illegal, so there's nothing they could charge them with, right? It was just disinformation. And that certainly had an impact, because it led people to believe something about one candidate that wasn't necessarily true. Now, to me, you don't need to make stuff up about Hillary Clinton. She had enough things to make her a terrible candidate. You didn't need to make up stuff, right? But you can't do that. It's easy to get people to do something, to believe something if you lie or you misrepresent information. Don't do that in this class. You shouldn't do that at all, right? That starts with topic selection. Pick a topic that you can actually make us care about. Don't waste anybody's time by picking a topic that's just worthless. Try to promote positive ethical values. I had a student one time try to do a speech about how to illegally download and use video game files. I'm like, no. But why? I'm like, really? You can't promote theft in one of your speeches. Try to benefit all of your listeners. If you're only talking to a certain percentage of your listeners, you're wasting everybody else's time, and that's unethical. Wasting people's time is a terrible thing. In this class, there's nothing that you will do that is a waste of time. Every assignment that I have or will ever have is for a reason. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want you to waste my time. Make sure your material and your reasoning, which we'll talk about in the persuasive chapter, make sure it is good. Don't use evidence that is extremely biased one way or the other, or misrepresentative, or leaves out important information, because somebody's going to know it and it's going to actually come back to bite you. Think about the consequences of your words. We have, per the First Amendment, freedom of speech. That doesn't mean, just because you can say something doesn't mean you should say something. It also doesn't mean that you shouldn't have consequences. So by all means, if you don't want to serve a gay couple, if you don't want to cook, if you don't want to make their wedding cake, that's fine. Although you technically, under the Constitution, at that point, you can't serve anybody a wedding cake. That's fine, but don't expect your business to not have consequences from that, right? Whether you personally agree with that is irrelevant. You make a statement, political statement like that as a business, your business is going to have consequences. My personal thing when it comes to businesses, if they post political ideology from any side, I just don't go there. That's not a business's job. A business job is to serve me an ice cream cone or whatever, right? It's not to make a political statement. So your words and your actions have consequences. So if you're in here giving a speech about something that's particularly inflammatory, that could impact somebody. Think about your audience. And we'll talk about the audience analysis next time, right? And try to be the best speaker you can be. One of the things that pisses me off more than anything in this class is so many students are apathetic. I hate apathy. I don't understand how anybody can be apathetic about anything. I don't get it. Literally, my brain is incapable of understanding the concept of apathy. I just don't understand why somebody could just go through life not caring about stuff, right? Anything I do, I try to be the best I can be. That doesn't mean I am the best. That means I try to be the best. I have been told by supervisor after supervisor that I work too hard as an adjunct. If you break down how much work I do for the amount of money, it works out to be about $3 an hour. You work too hard. My wife says that all the time. You work too hard. I'm like, shit's got to get done, right? Because I don't want to be a crappy teacher. I want to be the best teacher I can be. So I work at it. So when I come in here, you know, this is coming from a lot of energy and passion to be the best I can be. When I get a student that comes up here and they're phoning it in, it just pisses me off, right? You're wasting a chance to send a good message. Why would you do that? I just don't understand it. And so when people come in here and they literally put the minimal effort in, you're saying that you're okay with mediocrity, and I just don't get that. Anybody here just fine with mediocrity? You just want to be okay at everything? Of course, you're not going to say that, but I don't get it. Like, if you're fine getting a C in a class, that's what I'm talking about. Now, there's acceptance. Like me, when it comes to math, I'm probably going to get a C. Not because I'm not trying. Numbers don't make sense to me. But I fight to try not to get a C. I'm not just going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to be very good at it, so I'm just going to give a crappy speech. Don't do that. Put in the time, put in the effort to be as good and prepared as you can be. The last part of this, we'll finish this next time because there's only a couple more. And then next time we will do audience analysis. Oh, I want to talk about the speech. The speech that is the 29th. No, that ain't right. 19th. Next Wednesday. The first speech. It's the brown bag speech. What I want you to do is go onto Blackboard and look at if you go into Blackboard, you go under speech assignment sheets, you will see an assignment sheet that says brown bag speech. Read that, go onto YouTube, watch a couple of brown bag speech videos, look for the short ones because some of them are like 8-9 minutes long. You want one that's like 1.5 to 2 minutes, short. Watch a couple of those videos. Then if you have questions, email me. Because I found out that if I try to talk about it and explain it too much, people just get confused. The very short version is you're going to be basically using 3 objects to tell us who you are, right? So like if I want to tell you who I am, I might use a water bottle, a book, and a I don't know, hiking shoe or something. And I would introduce you to who I am using those objects. So you're introducing us to yourself to the class. So at the end of the speech, we should know your name, we should know your age, etc. Right? We should know basic details, but you're not just going to stand up here and say, "Hi, my name is Kimber. I'm 47 years old. I have 2 kids and a wife, a stupid dog." Like, I'm not going to do that, right? That's boring. Using the 3 objects is a more interesting way to give some of that information. Again, read the assignment sheet. Watch a couple of YouTube videos. I used to link it, but then the links would always die. So I just stopped linking. You can just search brown bag speech. And then if you have any questions after that, ask me. And those will be due next Wednesday. We'll do those in class. All right, have a good weekend. Stay out of trouble, don't do drugs. Yeah, go out this door, please. I forgot to say that last time. We're going to spray all the desks. You germs. Have a nice day. Forward, right? Yep. Take it easy, Brian. Take it easy, Emma. Take it easy, Shay. Take it easy, Bree. Take it easy, Andy. Take it easy, dude. Girl, I don't know your name. I'll get there. Smash, don't make it easy. Take it easy, gentlemen.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I don't know, it's like,
Have a
pretty
nice
brand
day.
new past it.
You too.
I was lying, it's just my third. Oh, really?
I'm gonna die from the chemical smell.
Yeah.
It's literally, you can leave that open. It's legit making me cough, man. Did it stop recording?